Hey everybody, it's Bob Crossan from Water World and Wastewater Digest. I'm joined by Steutel from Kando. She's the marketing lead there. We're going to be talking about monitoring and water reuse here at the Water Reuse Symposium 2023 in Atlanta. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time too. Why don't we start with monitoring in general? Why is it so critical to monitor for water in water reuse applications? I think that's seems a little self-answered.
Yes. Well, and also not, because it's not necessarily always being done. Like the traditional method of monitoring wastewater often just only comes at the wastewater treatment plant, because that's the traditional way of thinking of we're treating the wastewater at the treatment plant. But there's a whole phase before that becomes very, very important, the collection system, where everyone's discharging into the collection system. So the municipal discharges, but also the industrial discharges, which are often heavier discharges from the refineries or petrochemical factories. And these are often heavy discharges that could hurt the process of the wastewater treatment plant. So as soon as something is being discharged in the collection system and it could harm the process, cost rise, operational costs, these type of things, and it could even be disastrous, leading up to killing the microorganisms in the wastewater treatment plant. So that's why we always say that looking or monitoring at the collection system upstream is very, very important, because if the wastewater quality upstream is as good, then the wastewater treatment plant doesn't have to work as hard.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges that you run into when it comes to monitoring? It sounds like within the plants it's rather easy compared to outside of the plant. Am I understanding that incorrect? Or?
Well, let's not tell the wastewater treatment plant operators this. No, but it's one of the worst environments that are out there. If you can only imagine what everyone's discharging into the system, think of just us at home. You go to the bathroom, you shower, the hair. And I think also the people that are not familiar with the water industry, they just chug everything into the system. So, for example, when you really want to monitor this part of the cycle, the water cycle, it's a very harsh environment, and it's very hard to do, mainly because of all the stuff that's floating in around, like oils, fog, but also rags, hair, the fatbergs you've probably heard about.
Yep.
So it's a very difficult environment to collect good data, and so far it's always been sort of a black box, because they don't really know what's happening in there, because it's so hard to monitor what's going on. So normally they do grab sampling, just basic samples that they pull with the hand, but then you don't really know a lot on what's actually happening, because it's just a moment of time. And when you start doing that on a continuous basis, 24/7, then you really understand what's going on, you understand behavior, where things are coming from, and really learn sort of the activity of the dischargers, if it's SIUs or even, dumpings in the system by random people.
Yeah, so harsh environment. Is there any connectivity issue that runs into with monitoring like that, or is it not as big an issue as it was maybe 10 years ago?
Well, we're using a cellular network that we find quite good, that runs on batteries, and so far that works for us very well. So far we didn't have that many issues.
Oh, okay, cool. And what about the future of monitoring in water use applications? Where do you see that going, and what do you think people will be doing with monitoring and water reuse?
Well, it's very, very much up and coming, mainly because everyone's dealing with so many, challenges, climate change, droughts, and specifically here in the U.S. So we're now using mainly surface water for our drinking water purposes, and states are running out of it. So reusing water becomes very, very important, because we're running out of the surface water resources. So that is a focus. And in order to monitor or to improve the methods of treating water, specifically for water reuse, are of a higher standard, as you can imagine, because it's going to go directly to the community. So you need to make sure that the standard of the wastewater quality is as high as possible and as safe as possible, because you're eliminating a couple of phases out of the traditional wastewater treatment plant process to DPR. So therefore, we always say that the collection system aspect, where we're discharging the wastewater, becomes then more important, because this is already where you can see what's going on into the wastewater before it goes into the wastewater treatment plant. So if anything happens in the system that is not meeting permits or requirements or the standard benchmark of where wastewater should be, you can allocate where it's coming from. You can see actually what's happening, how long it takes to get to the wastewater treatment plant, and notify also the utility on the type of event that's coming their way, so they can strategize accordingly. And sometimes, this could be very minimal, but it could also be severe, that sometimes they will need to divert the inflow of the wastewater treatment plant, which could be useful because it would save them from a lot of the challenges of killing microorganisms or something in the wastewater treatment plants, or simple things like fog, oils, things.
Yeah, so enabling decisions is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I think the main important aspect is strategizing accordingly, so knowing what's ahead of you, and enabling them for decisions and make them more efficient. So if you can imagine, we had some of the utilities that were doing grab samplings before. They didn't know where it was coming from, but they already saw it in the wastewater treatment plant. But the time that it takes in order to collect all this data, to figure out where it's coming from, if you're not monitoring this constantly, you're sort of in the dark. And then you have your usual suspects and you go there, but you can't really do anything because you don't have the proof yet. And by monitoring this continuously, you see the activity of discharger over time, so you could actually also use it for transparency purposes, communication purposes with the SIUs, and work with them, because sometimes they just don't know that they're doing something wrong. The pre-treatment could be broken, or they have a new cleaning team that is discharging something that they're not aware of. And then you can just support them in saying, hey, we see that over time you're doing fine. However, all of a sudden we see that there's a change in your activity. From our experience, it looks, it could be the pre-treatment system, or it could be a new cleaning team that is discharged that hasn't been educated on what they can, throw down the drain or not. And then we can really support them and help them in improving their behavior, rather than, we always say it's better to collaborate rather than pinpointing the fingers of what's wrong, because sometimes they're just not aware, and we're all there together to improve the wastewater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. I hope it wasn't too long.
And for everyone who's watching, check out our video description below. You can get some more details on water recycling and reuse on all of our websites, as well as some other interviews that we're conducting here at the Water Reuse Symposium. And once more to Annalie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Bob.